Today I want to tell you a story I found on Reddit from the man who lived it. It's the story of a guy who trained every day, developed a detailed plan, prepared for what seemed impossible, climbing the Great Pyramid of Giza. But what was supposed to be his greatest adventure turned out quite differently. It's the story of a guy who trained every day, developed a detailed plan, and prepared for what seemed impossible, climbing the Great Pyramid of Giza. But what was supposed to be his greatest adventure turned out quite differently. In his post, he details his preparation and plan, but he didn't foresee the most important thing. Let's begin. I knew it was illegal before I ever booked the flight. That's the part people always ask first. Yes, I tell them, I knew. In Egypt, climbing the pyramids isn't just frowned upon, it's strictly prohibited. Fines, arrest, deportation, in some cases jail time. The authorities don't treat it as a prank or a tourist stunt. It's considered damage to a protected archaeological site, a monument that has stood for over 4,500 years. And still in 2019, I decided I was going to climb the Great Pyramid of Giza. Not for Instagram, not for a viral video, not even for bragging rights. I spent 3 months planning. Not how to avoid the law. I'm not going to write a guide for that. But physically and mentally preparing for the climb itself. Early morning runs to build stamina, box jumps to simulate explosive upward movement, wall climbs at my gym where I deliberately avoid marked routes, forcing myself to adapt to awkward spacing. I researched heat conditions in Giza in late October. Daytime temperatures still hit above 30 degrees Celsius, 86 degrees Fahrenheit. Stone absorbs heat. Even in the evening, it radiates warmth. I ordered gloves with high friction grip, the kind used for masonry work, lightweight trail shoes with aggressive tread, a hydration vest slim enough to fit under a jacket. I told myself I wouldn't post about it, that it would be private. I told myself it was about proving something. That was a lie. It started innocently. I had always been fascinated by ancient structures, not in a conspiracy theory way, but in a physical way. The weight of them, the scale, the idea that human hands stacked millions of stone blocks without modern machinery. The Great Pyramid, also known as the Pyramid of Khufu, rises about 146 meters originally and still stands at roughly 138 meters today. Around 2.3 million limestone blocks, each one weighing tons. Every time I looked at it, I didn't just see history. I saw a climb. I had been into urban climbing and bouldering for years. Nothing extreme, nothing reckless. Abandoned factories, cranes. Stupid, I know. Cliff faces with proper gear and permissions. I trained 5 days a week. Grip strength, endurance, leg power, weighted step-ups to simulate vertical repetition, static hangs to increase finger strength. The pyramid isn't smooth, it's layered, stepped, but each block is uneven, worn, slanted. The gaps vary. It's not a staircase. It's unstable geometry built in 2560 BCE, and it is absolutely not meant to be climbed. The Egyptian government has made that clear for decades. There are guards, cameras, patrols, stories of tourists detained within minutes, which only made it worse. Because the more I read about failed attempts, the more it felt like a challenge. Part 1. The Decision, 2019. I didn't wake up one morning and decide to climb the Great Pyramid of Giza. It was slower than that, more deliberate, like a crack forming in glass, invisible at first, then impossible to ignore. It started in January 2019. in a cramped apartment thousands of miles away from Egypt. Winter, gray skies, too much time indoors. I was 27, working a job that paid well enough to survive, but not enough to feel alive. My evenings were repetitive: gym, microwave dinner, YouTube documentaries about ancient civilizations. That's when the pyramid stopped being a documentary backdrop and became something physical in my mind. Not a mystery, not aliens, not conspiracies. Stone, height, weight, a structure that had stood for more than 4 millennia, the oldest of the 7 wonders of the ancient world, and the only one still standing. Every time I saw it framed against the desert near Giza, something primitive lit up in my brain. Climb it. I want to be clear about something from the beginning. I knew it was illegal. Egyptian law strictly prohibits climbing the pyramids. It's considered trespassing and damage to a protected archaeological site. There are fines, arrests, deportations, in some cases, short jail sentences. The site is monitored, guards patrol constantly. Tourists have been detained within minutes of attempting it. I read all of that. And instead of discouraging me, it sharpened the idea, which is where the psychology gets ugly. Because the more I told myself don't, the more it became a test, not of strength, of nerve. The rationalizations. I told myself I wasn't like the influencers who do it for viral videos. I wouldn't film a stunt intro. I wouldn't live stream. I wouldn't shout from the top. I convinced myself it would be private, personal, almost respectful. That's how your brain tricks you. You can wrap selfishness in poetic language and call it a pilgrimage, but at its core, it was ego. The idea of standing somewhere forbidden, somewhere ancient, somewhere few modern humans had stood legally. I researched obsessively. The Great Pyramid, also known as the Pyramid of Khufu, was originally about 146 meters tall. Today, it stands slightly shorter due to erosion and the loss of outer casing stones. Around 2.3 million limestone blocks, each weighing between 2 and 15 tons. The blocks at the base are massive, chest high in many cases. Higher up, they become smaller but more irregular. The surface isn't smooth, it's stepped, but it's uneven, slanted, and unstable in places. This wasn't a ladder. It was an ancient, crumbling geometry problem. The training by February, the idea had turned into a plan. I didn't tell anyone, not my friends, not my climbing partners. If I said it out loud, someone would talk sense into me. So I trained quietly, 5 days a week, morning runs for endurance, 5 kilometers, then 10 kilometers, not because the climb is long in distance, but because fear spikes your heart rate, and I knew adrenaline would hit hard. At the gym, I shifted my routine toward explosive leg strength, weighted step-ups onto high boxes to simulate lifting my body onto chest-high stone blocks. Grip training became obsessive. Dead hangs, one-arm assisted hangs, farmer's carries with heavy kettlebells until my forearms burned. I practiced climbing artificial walls without following marked routes, forcing myself to adapt to awkward holds. No chalk, no bright holds, just raw friction. Because limestone isn't friendly. It's abrasive, unpredictable, and 4,500 years of erosion doesn't make it safer. By April, my resting heart rate had dropped. My pull-up count had increased. My legs felt solid. The fantasy was becoming logistical. Gear, I refused to bring professional climbing gear. No ropes, no harness. That would make it premeditated in a different way, more obviously destructive, more obviously criminal. Instead, I focused on subtle equipment, lightweight trail shoes with aggressive tread for grip, high friction work gloves, the kind masons use, a slim hydration vest that could fit under a loose overshirt, lightweight pants with reinforced knees, everything neutral colored, nothing flashy. I tested the gloves on rough concrete walls behind my apartment building, scraped my knuckles more than once. The first time I misjudged a jump during training and slammed my shin into a box, I lay on the gym floor staring at the ceiling, and instead of thinking, "This is stupid," I thought, "Good. Now I know what impact feels like. That's when I should have stopped." Researching the site, I studied satellite images of the Giza plateau near Cairo, not for escape routes, I won't describe that, but to understand the layout, where the main tourist flow gathered, where security posts were visible, how far the pyramid stood from the entrance paths. I read about previous arrests, some climbers detained within minutes, others fined heavily and deported. Egypt takes preservation seriously, and rightly so. The pyramids are UNESCO World Heritage Sites. Millions visit each year. Even minor surface damage adds up over time. Every article ended with the same message: don't do it. And I absorbed every warning like it was part of the preparation. Booking the flight. In August 2019, I opened a flight search page. I stared at the prices for an hour, closing the tab, opening it again. My cursor hovered over confirm. I remember my hand actually shaking, not from fear, from anticipation. When the confirmation email arrived, it felt unreal, like I'd crossed a line that couldn't be uncrossed. The flight was set for late October, cooler temperatures, fewer peak season crowds, but still warm enough for tourism. I told my family I was going to Egypt to see historical sites. That part was true. I told my co-workers I needed a break. Also true. Also true. What I didn't say was that I had a private, reckless objective waiting in the desert. The first glimpse. When my plane descended into Cairo in October 2019, the city sprawled endlessly, dense, layered, alive. And then, faint in the haze, I saw them. The pyramids. They don't look dramatic from the air. They look out of place, like geometry dropped into chaos. But when I saw the Great Pyramid rising near Giza for the first time in person, something inside me went quiet. It was bigger than photos suggest, heavier, real. For a brief moment, standing there with tourists and guides and vendors calling out in multiple languages, I felt small in the right way. And for a second, just one, I considered abandoning the plan. Because up close, it didn't look like a challenge, it looked like history. But obsession doesn't dissolve that easily, and I had already trained for months. Part of me needed to know if I could do it, even if I shouldn't. Part 2, the waiting game. If part 1 was about ego, part 2 was about doubt. I arrived in Egypt in late October 2019, telling myself I was just another tourist. I booked a modest hotel in Giza, close enough to see the plateau from the rooftop terrace. Every morning, the Great Pyramid of Giza sat on the horizon like a silent accusation. It's strange how something so massive can feel like it's watching you. The first 2 days, I did everything the right way. I bought an official ticket. I walked the designated paths. I listened to a licensed guide explain the history of Khufu's reign. I went inside one of the smaller pyramids where it was permitted, and the entire time, I studied the Great Pyramid from the outside, not for weakness, but for reality. Up close, it's not symmetrical perfection. The outer casing stones that once made it smooth are mostly gone. What remains is stepped limestone blocks, eroded and uneven. Some are cracked, some tilt slightly, some have gaps large enough to swallow a foot if placed carelessly. And everywhere guards, uniformed men stationed at intervals, tourist police, security personnel watching the crowds, whistles hanging from necks, radios clipped to belts. The myth that you can just sprint up unnoticed is exactly that, a myth. People get caught often quickly, and when they do, it's not a joke. There are documented cases of detentions, heavy fines, confiscated passports. Climbing isn't just trespassing, it's treated as endangering yourself and disrespecting a protected monument. On my second evening, I stood near the base and placed my hand against one of the lower blocks. The stone was warm from the sun, rough, pitted. It felt alive in a geological way, like it had memory. And I felt something else I hadn't anticipated: shame. Because standing there among families, elderly tourists, school groups, I suddenly saw how selfish the plan was. This wasn't an abandoned factory. This wasn't some forgotten urban relic. This was one of humanity's most important historical structures. I went back to my hotel that night, genuinely considering canceling the idea. The internal argument. That night, I couldn't sleep. From my balcony, I could see the faint outline of the plateau under moonlight. I replayed the potential outcomes over and over. I get stopped immediately. I get arrested. I'm detained for days. I'm deported. I injure myself halfway up and make international headlines for all the wrong reasons. And the question that kept cutting through everything: for what? There was no prize at the top, no medal, no revelation guaranteed, just a story, and possibly a criminal record in a foreign country. I almost packed my gloves into the bottom of my suitcase and told myself it was over. But obsession doesn't disappear in one night. It morphs. The next morning, I woke up with a calmer thought. If I was going to abandon the idea, I needed to know I truly couldn't do it, not just that I was scared. Part 3. Conditioning in the desert. For the next 3 days, I trained lightly in private, not on the pyramid, never that, but in my hotel room and on permitted rocky terrain outside the main tourist flow. Body weight exercises at dawn, grip drills with my gloves, step repetitions using concrete ledges. I paid attention to the heat. Even in October, the sun in Egypt is relentless. The limestone absorbs warmth all day and releases it slowly after sunset. Climbing during peak afternoon would be physically punishing and visibly obvious. I watched the patterns of the site, when crowds thickened, when tour buses arrived, when security shifted positions, not to evade them, I won't describe that, but to understand the rhythm of the place. There's a strange duality at the Giza plateau. On one side, it's chaotic. Vendors, camels, cameras clicking nonstop. On the other, there are moments of stillness where the wind moves sand across stone and the pyramid looks untouched by modernity. It was during one of those quiet moments that I made the final decision. Commitment, I chose a late afternoon. Not because it was best, but because the light would be fading soon after. I told myself that if I started and felt wrong about it, truly wrong, I would come down immediately. No summit obsession. No, I've come this far. Just awareness. The morning of the day I chose, I felt eerily calm. No dramatic music in my head, no racing heartbeat, just focus. I dressed simply, neutral colors, comfortable shoes, gloves tucked into my waistband under a loose shirt, hydration vest thin beneath the fabric. I left my passport locked in the hotel safe. I didn't want it on me if things went badly. I remember looking at myself in the mirror before leaving. I didn't look like a criminal. I looked like a tourist. And that contrast unsettled me more than anything else. The plateau that afternoon. The sky was pale blue, the sun dipping but still strong. The Great Pyramid towered above the plateau, casting long geometric shadows across the sand. Tourists moved in clusters, some sat resting on stones. Guides pointed upward while explaining historical facts about Khufu and the 4th dynasty. I walked slowly, casually. Every step closer to the base made my breathing more deliberate. I told myself one final time, you can still walk away. And for a brief second, a tiny fracture in my resolve, I almost did. Then a group nearby laughed, posing for photos with the pyramid behind them, and I felt that primitive surge again. Climb it. Not for them. For you. That's what I told myself, which, looking back, was the most dangerous sentence of all. I placed my hand on the first massive limestone block at the base. It was rougher than I remembered, warmer, real. My pulse ticked in my ears. Somewhere behind me, a whistle blew. Not at me, just generally. The sound felt amplified. I slipped on the gloves, adjusted my footing, and in that suspended second before my body left the ground, I understood something clearly. Once I started, there was no pretending anymore, no half commitment, no moral gray area. It would either be ascent or arrest. I exhaled, and I climbed. Once my hands gripped the rough limestone, everything else fell away. Months of training, planning, obsessing, it all became immediate, tactile. My gloves scraped against the eroded surfaces, dust falling in tiny clouds with every movement. Each block was uneven, unpredictable. Some protruded slightly, some leaned inward, threatening to tip under my weight. I reminded myself, slow, steady 3 points of contact. Every misstep could be fatal. The climb was shorter than it felt. Physically, maybe 10 minutes. Mentally, it was a lifetime. Each meter up, the plateau beneath shrank. Tourists became miniature figures. The desert stretched out like a golden sea. I could see Cairo in the distance, smog blending with the setting sun, the Nile a thin, dark ribbon. I reached the uppermost section. The world opened in every direction. The plateau, the smaller pyramids, the city skyline beyond. The wind picked up slightly, carrying a dry, gritty smell. The limestone radiated heat, still warm from the day. I leaned back carefully, trying to absorb the view. For a moment, I felt alive in a way I never had before. Triumphant, perhaps. A fool's triumph, but real. And then I realized this wasn't about the view. It never was. The shouting started faintly below. Guards, security personnel moving with precision. Their radios crackled, my pulse quickened. I was far too exposed to descend casually. Every instinct screamed panic, but panic would get me hurt. I exhaled, methodical, 1 block at a time. My arms burned, my fingers ached. Every drop of sweat stung my eyes. The desert wind mixed with dust, making the limestone slick. Then reality snapped back. I regained my balance, taking a deeper breath than I thought possible. I moved faster. The desert floor approached. The guard raised his radio and waved another person over. 2 more joined. My legs burned, my arms trembled. Finally, I touched the ground, feet on sand. heart racing. Safe for now, but not unseen, not unpunished. They surrounded me immediately, firm hands on my shoulders, questions shouted in rapid Arabic, confiscation of my passport, escort to a small security office near the entrance. I was sweating, dust covered, my gloves ripped in several places, my chest heaving. No violence, no theatrics, just controlled, unwavering authority. I signed papers, paid fines, and I was escorted to a taxi. My clothes dusted with desert sand and limestone, my mind buzzing with adrenaline and regret. By the next morning, I left Egypt quietly. My flight back to my country was uneventful. I returned to the routines of daily life, but the memory stayed. The weight of that limestone in my hands, the expanse of the desert from above, the sharp, measured control it demanded. Years later, I understand something I didn't then. The world's greatest monuments aren't there to be climbed. They are there to witness humanity's persistence, our imagination, our mortality. I had tried to impose myself on it, and I was humbled. The lesson? Some heights aren't meant to be conquered. Some structures endure beyond us, and some moments, terrifying as they are enough simply to survive. I never climbed anything illegally again.